Okay, hello everybody. Welcome to this information session on MA in Applied Economics. Let us get rid of the echo and then I'll begin. Okay, I think we're set now. We've gotten rid of the echo. We're ready to begin. My name is Dennis Leyden. I'm the Director of Graduate Studies in the Department of Economics here in the Bryan School at UNCG. And helping out today is Mary Lisa Pegg from our recruiting office and Rob Owens, who is the expert on all things technological. So at any rate, the purpose of today is to give you some information about our MA in Applied Economics program, walk you through the process by which you could apply if you're interested, and finish up with questions and some contact information. Before we begin, why am I not? Hold on for a second, I'm not moving forward in my paging. Oh, down here, I see. Okay. Okay, great. As you can tell, I'm not the expert in technology. A couple of notes before we begin. First, the whole point of this is to help you get information so you can make a decision as to what program meets your interest best. We certainly hope you think our program is. But in any event, feel free to type your questions at any time, and our team will answer them in the chat window. If you're having technology trouble, you'll only hear the host speaking. Please be aware you'll only hear me speaking. Audio and video for all other participants has been disabled to avoid confusion. But if you're having technical issues, feel free to contact Rob Owens at reowens@uncg.edu, and he'll get right on it. Here's an outline of what I thought might be useful for you. Basically, 1, 2, 3, 4 topics. First, why a Bryan School MA in Applied Economics? What is it about our program that we think might be attractive for you? Then to talk about program specifics. Third, to talk about the admissions process itself. And then lastly, questions. And as I mentioned, we'll have contact information at the very end as well, so that we can follow up later on if you're interested. So why a Bryan School MA in Applied Economics? Essentially, what I want to argue is that there are 4 dimensions to that. One is our perspective is unique. 2, there are some good career opportunities, and we can provide career information in a minute, and also talk about the industries where you might get jobs and the different types of job functions. And last is that the cost is actually quite low for a program such as this, so that on net, when you look at all the benefits and costs, it adds up to something with a high value added. In terms of the perspective, the basic notion is we're interested in giving you real-world problems and advanced data analytics skills so that you can make your way through the world and do both profitable in terms of salary and career advancement, but also interesting work as you move into a career. And the way we do that is by a unique combination of theory, policy, and analytics. To be sure, there are lots of masters of programs that deal with data analytics out in the academic marketplace. But many of them focus solely on that. And our experience is that that's not enough. It's not enough for 2 reasons. One, it's one thing to have the technical skills, but if you're going to be a full service analyst, you also have to be able to identify issues that need to be looked at. You need to be able to understand the dynamics of them. And our combination of theory, policy, and analytics does that. The other thing that's important, and we hear this time and time again from our alumni, is that it's one thing to do the analytics, but if you can't talk to management, if you can't talk to your director, if you can't convey the results of your work in words that others who are less technically inclined can understand, it really doesn't do much good. And our program, again, because of this mix of theory, policy, analysis, and analytics, allows us to do it. Our alumni tell us time and time again that that's one of the real assets of their degree when they start working. In terms of career information, in terms of finding a job, we have a strong alumni network. It's typically each year we get calls from our alumni who say, you know, I've moved up, I'm now a department head, we've got 2 positions opening. Who do you have who can do this or that? Starting salaries vary. It depends upon the industry people want to go in. It depends on how wide a range of in terms of geography that they're searching, but on average, starting salaries are about $55,000 to $85,000, and that's typically for our students who come straight from undergraduate school. So that's not too bad for just starting out in a career. 50% of our students typically have job offers before they actually get their degree, and 90% accept job offers in their field within 3 months of graduation. Earnings average about 30% more than an undergraduate degree in economics, and someone did some calculations that works out to more than $1 million in lifetime earnings increase as a result of the degree. Here's a list of just some of where our alumni have gone. You can see there's a rather wide range from public sector to private sector to nonprofit, more analyst jobs, such as the Center for Naval Analyses, which is associated with the Navy and the Marines, and so on. I won't read through all the list, but you can get a sense of what's going on there. If I generalize where those alumni are going, you can see it's quite a wide range. If we think in terms of industries, well, there are private industries, corporations. For example, we have an alumna who now works for Hanesbrands and does follows the demand for tens of thousands of SKUs and predicts demand on a quarterly or semi-annual basis. We have people who work for state governments, typically in some sort of research office, dealing with evaluating programs. We have people at the federal government who do the same. Department of Agriculture in Washington, Fannie Mae up in Washington, for example. We've also had others who have worked for congressional committees on their economic analysis staff and so on. There are research institutes such as Triangle Institute and medical centers, financial institutions, both private financial institutions such as banks, and also Federal Reserve offices, and even nonprofits. We have someone who works for Goodwill and essentially is a public/labor economist who evaluates their programs in order that those programs can do what they're intended to do in terms of helping people. In terms of job activities, you can see as well, there's quite a range. Model assessment is big. For example, we have someone who works for a bank in their stress test department, developing and evaluating models that are used to do the Federal Reserve required stress tests for major banks. Other people will do policy analysis or forecasting, risk analysis, or other types of economic analysis as well. What a lot of them tell me, our alumni tell me, is that as they work after a few years, they find that they have a number of opportunities for moving up. And again, it's because of that unique blend that they can talk to management, they can talk to directors and so forth. And so given their skill set, given those abilities, they're natural to move into directorships and so forth and continue progressing in their their career. This is not a dead-end single task degree that we are offering. And then finally, I mentioned that the cost is pretty low. In terms of time, it's 3 semesters. You start in August of one year and you finish up in December of the next year if you do the full-time version of it. The total cost for an in-state student, and this is tuition and fees for all 3 semesters. This is not semester cost, is $12,000. For out-of-state students, that cost is $32,000. That's not nothing, but when you look at the cost of other sorts of programs, it actually is quite competitive, if not on the low side with other programs. So we think on net, the benefits and the costs work out to quite a asset once you do graduate. In terms of program specifics, then, let me talk about the nature of our program, what it's like to participate in the program, what the curriculum looks like, and what sort of options you have in terms of full and part-time. The things I want to talk about are hands-on real-world training. This is not, although we're at a university, this is not an academic degree. This is very practical and intended to allow you to hit the ground running as soon as you leave. It's a collaborative environment for reasons I'll talk about, and a supportive one. There's a fair amount of curriculum flexibility in a program, even though it's only 3 semesters, and there are full and part-time options. In terms of hands-on real-world training, we very quickly like to get our students working with actual data sets and analyzing both small and especially large data sets. We've got a course even in big data. The instruction and use involves various software, but we emphasize the same software that's most frequently used by Fortune 500 companies and financial institutions. That software is SAS, by the way. But other software are used, most notably Stata. And so in various courses, you may have an option to use those as well. And we encourage students to develop software skills that they think they're going to need when they leave and get a job. And the faculty are familiar with many of those as well. The collaborative environment comes both from the sort of the ethic of our department, but also from the fact that class sizes are small. The result is that you get to know your faculty and fellow students fairly quickly, and faculty get to know you. It's not uncommon for faculty to talk in the hallways about how our students are doing and to be delighted in those who are doing well. And for those who might be stumbling a bit, to sit down and talk among the faculty about what seems to be the problem and what sort of plan can we do to bring that person back in to give them the best shot at completing the degree. Most students form study groups early on, and we certainly encourage them to work together to support each other. Whether you happen to be the person helping someone else or you're the person being helped, all sides benefit from those sorts of interactions. And they often lead to lifelong friendships. We also have an advisory council for the department, and many of the members of that council are, in fact, taken from our alumni. The focus of the program is applied research and policy analysis with a microeconomic slant in that area. Among the fields of focus include environmental issues, health issues, labor, technology and innovation policy, public economics, and that public economics is rather a broad catch-all term to include things such as various social welfare support programs, education, et cetera. And in fact, students sometimes find that they bring in other sorts of topics, but if they fit into this broad range, it's likely you're going to find interest among fellow students and the faculty. The curriculum is also somewhat flexible given the 3 semesters. Obviously, it has to be a tight one with only 3 semesters. But students have options in terms of additional microeconomic or macroeconomic theory. And in fact, those who are more ambitious can in fact do both. They can also specialize in their third semester in terms of data analytics or policy analysis, or you can choose a combination of courses that suit your particular interest. And we have students that do all of them. Here is a sort of the standard full-time curriculum. The semester, the program begins in August, early August, perhaps even as in this year, at the very, very end of July, with a mathematical economics course. That course is an intensive, essentially mathematical boot camp, in which we make sure that everybody, whether they come in with strong mathematical training or not quite as strong, all have the basic tools in order to succeed in later courses. That boot camp course finishes before the regular semester begins. In the first fall semester then, students take graduate microeconomic theory. They take a course in econometric methods, which emphasizes the practical aspects of that rather than sort of deep theory, although you will certainly get exposed to theory as well. And a data methods course in economics, which is where you get that introduction to basics in SAS training. In January, all our master's students then sit for 2 comprehensive exams, one dealing with the microeconomic theory, the other with econometric methods. This is a chance to make sure that everybody has understood what's going on and to identify any issues that students might have in order to bring them up to speed. And that typically happens the week before or the first week of the spring semester. In the spring semester then, students then get to choose whether to take a second semester of microeconomics or to take the macroeconomics. And as I just mentioned, those who are particularly ambitious are welcome to take both of them. They also take a course in econometric theory. The point of that is now that you understand how to use econometrics, you've got the basic tools, let's deepen your knowledge so you really understand what's going on and therefore have the foundation for developing broader skills. They're also required to take an applied policy methods class to give you some sense of how this material gets used in terms of evaluating policy. Then the summer, there are no courses. You're welcome to do whatever, although sometimes there are employment possibilities. But then in the fall semester, the third semester, everyone takes an empirical microeconomics course, which is essentially the capstone. That essentially is an integrative course. You take your theory skills, you take your econometric skills, and you put them to do several analyses, essentially sort of case studies of the type of work that you would do after you graduate. In addition, you need to take 2 electives, and those electives can vary. They can be field courses, labor economics, environmental economics, for example, but they can also be more data courses. They could be data courses such as time series and forecasting, one course, a big data and data analytics course is another. Whatever suits your interest and where you think your career path is going. And there are a few additional electives that are also possible as well if you want to cobble out your own specific curriculum. We also have the option of part-time. Part-time, I need to mention, depends on the particular circumstances of the individual. So in some sense, there is no single part-time option. There are lots of options. But this gives you an illustrative example of how you might do it. Instead of being a 3-semester program, it becomes a 5-semester program. And so one way to do that is to take the boot camp course in August, and then in the fall semester, take microeconomic theory. In January, you would sit for the microeconomic comprehensive exam to make sure you fully understand what's going on. And then in the spring, you would choose your microeconomic theory too, or the macro theory, or both if you have the interest and the time. Obviously, this is a part-time program, and the applied policy methods course. In the fall semester, Then the second fall semester, you would take econometric methods and data methods in economics, that SAS course, and sit for the econometric exam in January. In the second spring semester, semester 4, you would take econometric theory and one elective. And then in the fall, 5th semester, in the fall, you would take the capstone empirical microeconomics course and another elective. So that gives you some sense of what's going on. Basically, it's 2 courses a semester. But again, as I said, this is subject to working with the part-time student who's interested in the program. And there are various ways that we can adapt it to suit their needs. So now that you've got a sense of the value of the program and how the program is run, let me talk a little bit about the admissions process. I want to talk about the requirements, talk a little bit about financial support, and then deadlines. In terms of the requirements, you need a bachelor's degree. You need to take the GRE or the GMAT exam. We have a preference for the GRE exam, particularly since some of our MA students end up going on for our PhD, but either one is fine in terms of applying for the MA program. 3 letters of recommendation, and then for the 4 economics courses, although as I'll note, there is some flexibility here. The 4 economics courses we're looking for are intermediate microeconomics, intermediate macroeconomics, a mathematical economics course, which typically involves a little calculus and a little bit of linear algebra, and then an intermediate statistics or second statistics course with linear regression in it. We know that not everybody comes from programs that offer all of these, and therefore we're willing to consider alternatives. Particularly for the last 2, the mathematical economics and the intermediate statistics course. If you've got other mathematics or statistics courses and think they might be roughly equivalent, then let us know, and we'd certainly be willing to look at them as well. We also have students who sometimes don't have all of these courses, and we can work with them to try to give them those courses before they start participating in the full program. Oh, I should go back and note, in terms of scores, in terms of, obviously, we're going to be looking at a transcript. There is no single GRE score or GPA score that automatically guarantees you admission, nor automatically excludes you from admission. We look at the whole package. And in fact, there is also an option for a personal statement. It is not required to apply to the MA program, but if there are circumstances that you think the admissions committee should know about, you're certainly welcome to write something in that statement. In terms of the application process, there's also a possibility of financial support. In terms of what the department works on, it tends to be graduate assistantships, scholarships, part-time jobs, things we're involved in. But of course, there's also general financial aid that any university or graduate student might have access to for part-time and full-time students. The graduate assistantships typically are 20 hours a week, and you're helping a faculty member either with their teaching or their research or a little bit of both. There are also some scholarships, some in the department, some at a university level that are competitive and that we have to nominate applicants for. And whenever we see a scholarship that we think an applicant might qualify for, we certainly do make those nominations. And we've been pretty successful at getting awards in the past. And then there are, once students arrive here, particularly after their first semester, and they get those fast programming skills, we find that other departments and institutes on campus and private sector companies come to us looking for people who can help them out for short-time, part-time jobs. I should mention that we don't have the luxury of offering financial support to all our MA students. I certainly wish we did, but we don't. And so they tend to go to a small number of select students. but we are certainly constantly on the lookout for ways that we can provide that assistance. And if we can, we like to do that. And then for financial aid for part-time and full-time students, that's something you can work with our university with to see what options are available. In terms of deadlines, we have 3 formal deadlines, but let me talk about them a little bit so you get a better sense of what they mean. The priority deadline is February 15th. The reason we say that's priority is that's the date on which we start evaluating applications and deciding on whom we want to offer and can offer financial support. So if you want to maximize your chance of financial assistance from the department, the university, that's the deadline you want to shoot for. Please be aware that this means not only that you've submitted your application, but that all the materials are in it. And the things you need to work on particularly tend to be the letters of recommendation. Sometimes recommenders are a little slow, so you want to stay on top of that. And the GRE scores. If you take the GRE, it sometimes takes 4 or 5 weeks for those scores to show up at our university. So consider that when applying. In terms of sort of the regular deadline for domestic applications, it's domestic students, it's May 1st. For international applicants, it's April 1st, simply because the federal government requires lots more paperwork and checking of things, and so we need the extra month to do that. Please be aware that if there is still space, we are certainly welcome to entertain applications after May 1st. They can't be considered for assistantships or scholarships. The deadline has passed in terms of being able to do the paperwork to do that. But you're certainly welcome to apply, and if it's not too late, we'll do our best to process it and give you a decision in time for you to enter the program. Be aware that the program begins at the very beginning of August, so you can't wait till August to get them in. But we're a small enough program that we'll do our best to try to accommodate your application whenever it comes in and provide you with as much benefits as we can. Finally, in terms of application, let me emphasize our flexibility. If you don't quite meet the requirements, but you're interested, you think you have a strong record and you would be a good fit for the program, let us know and we'll try to work with you. It turns out that oftentimes we get people who maybe they weren't econ majors. I was talking to someone just yesterday about that. And I worked out a plan where she could, in fact, get those undergraduate courses in economics completed and enter the program. Obviously, these things have to be tailored to the individual, so I can't give you a standard process here. But please be assured that we'd be delighted to work with you if you have a otherwise strong record and you're interested. I should also mention that while if you need some undergraduate courses to be able to enter the program, those courses can be completed anywhere, online, at your home institution, here at UNCG. UNCG has what they call the Visions program. This allows people to take courses, undergraduate or graduate courses, before being admitted to a program. There's a limited ability for those courses to be transferred into a graduate program, but certainly it's a great way to get a taste of what we offer and to catch up on any undergraduate training that you didn't have already. And the link is there. You can check that out. And certainly let us know if you have questions about that you can't find answers to elsewhere. So that's the basics of the application process. And that brings us to the end in terms of what I wanted to talk about today. Again, as I said, we think we've got a program that has a unique niche, gives people a lot of benefits, especially when you look at the cost, which is quite competitive compared to other programs, and an application process that is flexible depending on your background and your needs. If you want to contact us, we'd be delighted to talk to you. As I said, I'm the Director of Graduate Studies in the Economics Department, And Dr. Jean Rosales is our graduate program coordinator. And you can reach both of us at economics@uncg.edu. So I'd be delighted to hear from you. I'd like to continue the conversation. If you're interested, just let me know and we can take it from there. So thank you for your time. I appreciate it. And if I don't have a chance to talk to you again, have a good rest of your life.